Clean version.
Monkey Boy's YouTube channel is stance independently and intersubjectively the best YouTube channel. Subscribe. I'm talking from the heart.
Yeah, so Monkey Boy's YouTube channel is the best YouTube channel. Stands independently, intersubjectively, and I'm very much speaking from the heart here when I say that.
Hey, do you have an argument God exists?
Appreciate you for having me up, man.
Word.
So I just wanted to just ask a question.
All right.
Because the whole argument is that God doesn't exist. And so
What?
how do
I'm asking
we
whether you have an argument God exists.
an argument?
Yeah, that God exists.
I know he exists.
I glaze you. Yeah, but I'm asking if you have an argument God exists.
So yeah, I mean, like I said, my argument is based off a question though. If
Then
that's
I don't
okay.
know what you mean by an argument, because arguments don't have questions.
So let me explain. Because for you, it's a belief that God does not exist. And so what
I'm
you
not,
do
I'm
is
not talking about my beliefs. I just want to know if you have an argument God exists. If you don't have an
sure.
argument, then we can talk about my beliefs after.
Well, that is the only reason why you have people come up, because you want to share or have an argument why he would exist, correct?
I want them to produce an argument that God exists.
Right. So yeah. So I guess my argument would be, how do you
That's a
disprove?
question.
Okay, I'll go with questioning. How do you disprove the landmarks that are in the Bible?
This is not IPA. You could tell this guy's not IPA. I mean, he thinks a question's an argument. Like, come on.
Well, no. But it's
Yeah,
logical.
but okay, I understand you're asking me that question. I just want to be clear if you have an argument, though.
No, because I don't really argue. I mean,
Okay, I guess you don't
my thing
know what I
is
mean by
if a
argument.
person believes something, what I like to do is question their
What I'm
logic.
asking you is, you have reasons that establish God exists.
Yes,
What are the reasons?
the biblical accuracy. Biblical accuracy. So that's what I'm saying.
Accuracy,
So
biblical.
yeah,
Wait, the accuracy of what in the Bible?
the landmarks. The
The
biblical landmarks.
landmarks?
Yeah, because the things.
Okay, let's
Because
say they're accurate about landmarks. Why would I think there's a God?
okay, so you go back to the Dead Sea Scrolls, which everything came from, which is what we read of, right? So that stuff can't be fake in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So
What
how
do
do
you?
you get a place? If I can
Wait, I
ask this
didn't. I'm
question,
not sure if I got an answer though. But I
right?
asked the
Yeah,
question.
right.
I'm
No,
not sure if I
yeah.
got an answer.
Oh well. These are questions I know you can't answer. That's why I'm asking you. I know
But why?
you.
I just asked you a question, right?
Okay, what was that again?
What about the landmarking is the reason I think there's a God?
Because of where it comes from. Because of the story that comes behind it.
Okay, why
Like,
is that a reason I think there's a God? I don't get it.
where did you hear about Sodom and Gomorrah before it existed? Where did
I'm asking you a question right now. Like, why do you
I
do
just
this
answered
every
you?
time I ask? No, you
I
didn't.
just answered you.
No, you didn't.
I did,
What
but
was the
it's
question
not.
you just answered?
Okay, let's
Oh my
okay,
God.
answer it one more
Look,
time.
what about the locations and stories behind them is reason I think there's a God?
Because the same thing that happened in the story is shown at the landmark. Like modern
Okay,
day Sodom and Gomorrah,
let's say that's
nothing can
true.
grow there because there is ash and sulfur everywhere. The
Let's
Bible
say
tells
that's
a story
true.
about that.
Let's say that's true. Why would I think there's a God?
Because in the Bible, that's the story that it gives is that it was burned to a pulp by God.
And
So
why would I believe that story?
there's a historical landmark
First,
because all of these stories come from out of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
why would I
Those
think
are
a God
those are
exists?
ancient. So
Why
why
would I
would
think a
these?
God exists?
Huh?
You're not giving me any reason. Like you're just not following. It's getting really frustrating.
Oh, I can't stop you from being
Look,
frustrated.
there's a range of phenomena at a landmark. There being ash, and that plants can't grow. Why would I think there's a God?
Well, no. So that's what I'm saying. The sulfur is still there till this day. Scientists
I
go there.
understand that.
Huh?
I'm granting you all the bullshit. Okay. There's
Well,
ash,
no.
nothing can grow. Let's say that's all true. Why would I think there's a God?
Oh, so you're saying why believe in the story that there was fire and sulfur that rained down in Sodom and Gomorrah that it talks about in the Bible? Because it's there at the same location, right? Why believe that?
That's not a good reason to think it.
Right. Why believe there's a huge boat
So then
on
why
top
would
of
I
a
think it?
mountain on Mount Ararat? That's there till this day.
I don't
It's the
understand why I
same
would
length
think.
as what was described in that Noah made. That's still there. In the
Okay,
in
so
the middle of the mountains, there's a rock with a huge rock with a split in it with an erosion. That's still there. The Red Sea, where it says this exact same location where it says that Moses parted it, and that there was fire that came down and burned the area. It's burned to a crisp still till this day. How do you explain that type of stuff?
Yeah, so PhD,
All,
you misspelled girlfriend. Can I just get clear? There's ashes in a place. Plants can't grow. Why would I think there's a God?
so what you're asking me is why should I believe the story?
Yeah,
That's what you're really asking me. Yeah. So that's the
sure.
thing. So once again, so this is one of those things. This is a belief thing. You have this is all I'm saying. I hear where you're at. I see where you're at.
I'm
But
not.
you
I'm
have
not.
all
I'm
these.
not.
You have all these. Now this is the
I'm
thing
asking
too.
I'm asking what's the evidence that it was done by a God?
Right. So that is where you are. So technically, no one can tell you that it was God. So that's where you're going to be.
What?
No one. I mean, to be honest,
I'm asking you what's the evidence that it was done by a God?
well, that's what I'm saying. No one can tell you that. Who can tell you that?
I'm
No one can
asking
tell you
you
that.
what I'm asking you what's the evidence it was done by a God?
The evidence. Okay. Well, for me, it's the Bible because I believe that the Bible is the infallible word of God.
How's that evidence that wait, how's the Bible evidence of it?
At what point do you start believing somebody's message? Let me. At what point? So if you
Can
have
you answer that
somebody,
question?
I am. I'm answering it to you,
No,
but I'm
you're
not going to
not.
answer the way
You
you want
just
me to
asked the
answer.
question. You just
I
asked the
am.
question.
I am. I
So
am.
don't
I'm
do
answering
that.
it.
Answer the question I'm asking you.
Okay. Let me see if I can
Oh my God, what is
word it
wrong
the
with
right way
you?
you want it.
Literally every time I've asked you a question, all you would do is not answer and then
No, not every
introduce
time.
a new
Ask me one more
question.
time. One more time.
What is the evidence that it was done by a God?
Well, see, that's what I just answered that. I'm gonna say it again. I can't tell you that. The only thing I can go by is what, because I believe that the Bible's.
I don't. Okay, I'm just. Jesus Christ. Next person. These people are such waste of time. But don't worry,
Brother,
I'm in a really patient mood. So,
yeah, you've
hey,
got more
do
patience
you?
than me, dude.
Yeah, do you have an argument God exists?
Yeah, so I'd posit the tag argument. I think that that's a very solid argument for its existence. I think that when you compare tag to other potential worldviews,
And it
it
just gets
reconciles.
worse.
It reconciles a lot more in terms of why we can do logic, why we can do reasoning, why we can have scientific inquiry in the first place. And if you don't have
Yeah, sure.
a justification for that, then are you a foundationalist? Or do you believe
So
that you can have self-evident truth?
what's the why are you asking me questions? I'm trying to get the argument.
Yeah, so like I just sort of want to see what we're
What's
dealing
the
with.
argument God exists? No, what's the argument God
Okay, well,
exists?
at its bare bones, the argument would be because these transcendental things exist, and because we cannot account for them using
What do you
purely
wait?
sense data, there would have to be another justification. And I think
Oh,
that it's
there's
better
okay.
grounded.
There's two. Wait. Let's stop. There's three things to address. I don't know what
Okay,
it means. I don't know what you mean by transcendentals unless you're using it in a Kantian sense. I have no reason, if you're using it in a Kantian sense, to think there are transcendentals. And three, I have no reason to think that you can establish these by merely empirical means. So, what do you mean by transcendentals? Let's start there.
yeah. So things like the self, right? Like, what would be the empirical evidence of
No,
the
I'm
unifying
asking
self?
what it means for something to be. Look, is by transcendental, is it just like a random set of like elements you just throw in the set, or is there like some defining characteristic of elements in the set?
Right. So transcendental in the way that I'd be using it,
Like I'm
I
asking
would
if you have a
only.
definition.
Yeah. So in the way that I'm using it, I would say transcendental is merely just something that cannot be perceived using only sense data.
Okay.
So, for example, something like logic, like what is the empirical
Why? So why would I think
data
there's
that we use for
transcendentals?
logic? Because you presuppose them in your everyday life. I mean, the fact that we're having a
Okay.
conversation right now,
What's the
you're
argument? Wait.
already agreeing.
Wait. What's the argument for that?
Okay.
Yeah. What's the argument? I'm
Well, the
presupposing
fact
there
that
are
we're having a conversation.
transcendentals. That's
Yeah, we're
question
having a
begging.
conversation right now.
That's question
So
begging.
you're presupposing that it exists because you're saying, okay, well, I can have this conversation and my words
Wait.
have
You're
meaning
not.
and they refer to logic.
Wait. You're not producing the argument that I'm assuming them. That's what I'm asking you right now to give the argument I'm doing.
Yeah, I am, and I'm saying that you're demonstrating it right now by having a conversation with me. So you're
So
presupposing that you can use
what's the
reasoning to reach
this
consensus
guy? What's the argument I'm presupposing them?
because you're engaging in it right now.
That's not an argument. Do you understand what's meant by argument? I'll write out an argument.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
You haven't given an argument. Don't act stupid. Unless you do you know what I mean by argument? Maybe you're not actually as bright as I think you are. Do you know what I mean by
Yeah. So
argument?
I would lay out. Yeah. So like laying out premises that lead to a conclusion.
Okay, you didn't give premises and a conclusion. That's clear.
Yeah. So the premise
Okay,
that I gave
let's.
was transcendentals exist,
So
therefore you have to
wait.
account for it.
Conclusion is, I'm presupposing there are transcendental. No, what's sorry, what's the argument?
Okay, so you want me to lay premise to that specific thing that you're presupposing?
What's the argument I'm making any presupposition?
Yeah, because you're engaging in it. So how can you not presuppose logic?
So
You're
what's
going to
premise one?
Yeah, because you engage in transcendental categories.
I engage in transcendental categories. Premise one.
Yeah.
Premise two.
premise 2, therefore you acknowledge their existence.
Therefore, is that the conclusion or a second premise?
Yeah. Well, there's no second premise because you utilize.
Then the
these
argument's
transcendental
invalid.
tags,
Then the argument's invalid.
Okay, so you think that you can engage in logic without a justification for believing in it?
The argument you gave is invalid. Do you understand that?
In what way is it invalid, brother?
Are you familiar with prop logic?
Never heard of it. Give me a rundown.
There's no way I can give you a rundown. So you don't know what validity means. What do you think I mean by valid? Look, you know what premises and a conclusion are. You don't know what. No, that's incorrect. Okay. Oh my God. What's worse than anyone ever running tag is when someone doesn't know any philosophy at all. Like they're just vacant in philosophy and they're running the worst apologetic you can ever imagine. The combination of those two is super frustrating. Okay, the argument is formally invalid. If you're familiar with prop logic, which you're not, what it means for an argument to be valid is something consulting the structure of the inference. The inference you gave is one where I could regiment the first premise and I could regiment the conclusion, and given they're not identical, the argument trivially follows a form of an inference called a non sequitur. So the argument's formally invalid. If you want to learn logic, I'll send you a textbook. You should probably not come here, because you said logic was a transcendental earlier. You have no concept of logic, you have no familiarity with logic, and yet you're using these devices and these types of philosophical terms. You have no clue what they are. You have no understanding of logic.
What you're doing here is you're actually you're flipping my argument against you onto me. You're saying, well, I'm utilizing logic even though I don't have definitive basis for it. But that's what I'm saying to you. I'm saying, well, if you don't ground your logic,
I'm saying you shouldn't be talking. I'm saying you shouldn't be talking about logics and then not knowing logic. That's just inappropriate. Why would you expect yourself to be at all saying anything correct? Right? You have no appropriation. You don't apprehend anything about logic. You've never read any literature. You're not aware of anything about logic. If I asked you to name a single rule of inference, can you do that? Probably not. If I asked you to give me the truth functional semantics of a conditional, can you give that? No. I doubt you know literally anything about logic at this point, if you don't even know what validity is. So all I'm saying is just like if you're talking with someone about particles, and if you don't know anything about physics, so just tell me. That's not an ad hom. Wait, that's not an ad hom.
Just tell me.
That's not me. That's not me. That's not me. That's not an ad hom. An ad hom is insulting the interlocutor in lieu of an inference. So what I'm not doing is attacking you instead of your argument. You gave an argument, I made a criticism, you didn't understand what the criticism was because you have no understanding of logic. Now I'm giving you a very obvious suggestion that you should probably read literature into the topics and devices you employ in conversation when you don't actually know what they are. So before using them in conversation, maybe read at least something rudimentary about them, very basic technicalities, so you even know what you're saying. If you don't know how to give a valid argument, how do you even debate? How do you expect to win a debate with invalid arguments? Okay, look.
I'm not trying to win. I'm trying to figure this out with you. I'm not trying to.
You're supposed to establish that I'm presupposing transcendentals. What's the argument?
Yeah, because you're engaging in it, man. Like that's why. So can I not?
What's the argument I'm engaging in the use of transcendentals?
Yeah, because you're trying to utilize logic right now in this conversation. Logic is transcendental.
What's the argument? Logic's transcendental.
Because there's no empirical sense data that you can use to prove its existence.
Correct me if I'm wrong. What it means for something to be a transcendental is something that exists that can't be perceived empirically, right?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, I don't think logic exists.
Okay, well then you have a fallacious worldview because you're engaging in that right now. You just made a claim, universal claim.
Wait, what's the fallacy I'm doing?
The fallacy is you're using logic to make a universal claim that logic doesn't exist.
The use of logic doesn't require logic's existence.
Of course it does.
What's the argument for that? What's the argument for that? Look, let me type out conclusion.
How can you make a universal claim?
The use of logic requires, the use of logic requires logic to exist. And this is funny enough because if you read into logical literature, you would know that most academic logicians actually don't think logic exists, right? I'm pretty sure most are like conventionalists in like the Carnapian sense. So they're not actually people who think like, I'm not going to actually say a percentage, but I'm pretty sure that most people who are professionals in the field of logic don't think logic exists, right? But in any case, that's just an intuition. I don't have the empirics. But P1, what's the argument that the use of logic requires logic existence?
Logic exists. Sorry?
Yeah, what's the argument the use of logic requires the existence of logic? P1.
Because you cannot use nothing. If what you're saying is I'm engaging in using logic and reasoning, but logic and reasoning doesn't exist, then you're just waffling. You're not actually doing anything. There's no consequence to the words you say.
I'm not understanding what's P1.
That there's meaning being translated in these words that you're speaking to me. That's fallacious.
I'm not. Wait. Calm down. What? Wait. That was not. It seems like now you're just like tweaking out. P1. What's P1?
What are you referencing?
The argument for the proposition the use of logic requires the existence of logic. What's the argument for that?
Because you are literally presupposing it exists by using it. You cannot
I'm not.
use something that
Wait.
doesn't
Okay. Whoa. Now you're making the claim
Can
I'm
you use something
presupposing
that
logic
doesn't
exists.
exist?
What? Wait.
If a
What's the
unicorn
argument?
doesn't exist,
Stop
why
talking.
use
Stop
it?
talking. Stop talking. Stop talking. What's the argument I'm presupposing logic exists?
Because you use it. You cannot utilize something that doesn't exist.
That's just
That is
repeating the
stupid.
last. Oh my god. That's repeating the last. That's repeating the conclusion of the last argument, which was in question.
Okay, so host, can you say unequivocally that you believe you
What?
can use
So
something
no.
that doesn't exist?
You're not going to ask me a question at this time. If you're not going to render an argument for the claim, the use of
Brother,
logic requires.
you're actually conceding the fact that
Brother,
you believe you can
brother.
use something that doesn't
I'm trying to
exist.
get the argument. Great. I'm trying to get the argument the use of logic requires the existence of logic. Do you have said argument?
Yeah,
Okay. What's P1?
because you cannot use something that's non-existent. Because you cannot utilize something that doesn't exist.
Okay. What's P2?
I can utilize logic. Therefore, logic exists.
No, that's, oh my god, that's not even the same conclusion. It's like you've done this twice now. When I asked you for an argument for a proposition, I asked you for the premises. You just made a new
Yeah, but you're being
conclusion.
so. I feel like what you're doing here is it's kind of disingenuous. You don't actually believe that logic doesn't
I'm being
exist.
disingenuous.
Of course you acknowledge it exists.
No, I
Yeah, but for the sake
genuinely
of the
don't think
argument.
logic
Well,
exists.
no, it doesn't.
No,
But you
I'm
think
not
you
doing
can
that for the
utilize
sake of
logic. No, it
argument.
doesn't exist.
I genuinely
Okay,
don't
so
think
can you
logic
use
exists.
logic if it doesn't exist?
Yeah.
So you believe that you can utilize things that don't
So let's
exist.
just get
For
clear.
example,
Of course I do.
unicorns don't exist, but I could still eat one.
I'm not saying any of that.
Is that true? Can I do that if unicorns don't exist? Can I eat a unicorn?
No, you can't eat a unicorn if they don't exist.
Why not? Why not?
Because the act of eating requires one to exist.
Okay, so the act of utilizing logic doesn't require logic to exist.
No, you haven't established that, and
Are you
no one in
serious?
philosophy thinks that.
Are you serious? You just
I'm
agreed with me
serious.
that I cannot utilize something if it doesn't exist.
No, I didn't agree to that. I said you can't
okay,
eat something if
explain
it
to
doesn't
me
exist.
how you're able to utilize something that's non-existent. Explain that to me. So what is the process by which we can use something that doesn't exist in reality?
I'm not sure how I can answer that.
Yeah,
I mean,
you can't. That's
do you think
nonsense.
rules of chess? Do you think rules of chess exist?
Yeah, of course.
Oh wait, I just realized what's happening. Oh my god! Just for anyone who I know is like someone I'm acquainted with who does know basic philosophy, I just had like a brain blast. Right? He's a layman. He has no concept of ontological language, so he says things like logic exists, and he doesn't even know what he's saying. Right? In the same way, for anyone who's here who, might understand what I'm saying, just like a more realist might use more realist devices and not understand more realism, right? They don't understand realist devices. They usually have like some normative entanglement view. It's the same thing here. He has no clue what he means by logic exists. He's using it in like a folk way. And that's an even bigger problem talking with these normies who have no concept of philosophy. And then they want to say logic exists. Okay. So I'm sure we're not going to...
Logic exists. Without it, there's
Yeah.
zero meaning being conveyed between you right now. Without
Let's-
that, we
whoa.
cannot actually guarantee that the conversation we're having carries meaning.
Why would I accept that in order for something to be meaningful, it must exist? Why would I accept that?
That's not the premise I gave. I said that without logic,
You just
the
said you
conversation we're
can't
having
use
right
something
now
that
is just
doesn't exist.
nonsense.
And then you said because it wouldn't be meaningful if it doesn't exist. Which just means you're saying that
No, I'm
you
saying
can't
we
use
could not
meaningless things. Can logic be meaningful even if it doesn't
No,
exist?
That's not what I said.
I'm asking you that.
So that's not the claim I made. I said without logic,
Okay,
you and
can you
in this
answer the
conversation
question?
could not convey meaning of something.
Can you answer the question?
Is there a reason why you won't address what I'm saying?
Can you answer the question I'm asking?
Sure, go ahead. Ask
And
me
also,
again,
I've
but I would
already
like to
addressed what
actually
you
make
said
a
3 times. I've asked you to give an argument and you hadn't gave one.
point. No, you haven't.
So, yeah, I have. I asked you to produce the
You
argument.
conceded to the fact that you
I've
believe
even typed
you
out.
can use things that don't exist. You conceded
Yeah,
to that twice.
Yeah, I did. It's like, this is something almost any philosopher would accept too. So, like, cool. I don't know what you think you're getting me on.
No, that's not true.
Like,
But there are philosophers
really?
that reason their way into an endless hole.
Name one.
That
Name
doesn't
one.
make it
Name
correct.
one. Wait. Name one philosopher who thinks you can't use something that doesn't exist. Name one. Like, are you joking?
one
In
philosopher, I can't give you
contemporary analytic philosophy, a very standard device is called useful fictions, which just means things that don't exist that are useful. You can read Stanford Encyclopedia. It's written it's written by PhDs. Right? It's like one of the most common things. You can
Sure.
you can read
The logic doesn't
you can
exist.
read
What you're
literally
saying is that
any intro
logic
to
doesn't
analytic
exist.
philosophy, and
The
you would
process we
understand
call
what a
it.
philosophical
Yeah,
you'd
that's
understand
fine.
what a
Let's
useful
actually get to
fiction
the
is.
crux of the issue.
Useful fictions are not something that's like
Let's actually
contentious
get to the
among
crux of
philosophers.
I'm
I'm trying to
not here
understand. You're
debate
claiming
the
to. You're
viewpoint of other
claiming.
philosophers.
Well, you said that I was wrong about that, right? And you were talking out your ass.
Yeah, so again, so let's actually address
Okay.
what your claim is.
So let's just
are
get
you
clear.
saying, yes, logic
We're
doesn't
talking about
exist?
your claim.
Oh my
Wait,
goodness.
we're talking about your
Logic
claim.
doesn't exist.
We're talking about your claim. We're talking about the
Oh,
claim that the use of logic requires logic to exist.
yes, because I don't think that it can be
Okay,
true
what's
that
the
you can
argument
use
for
something
that?
doesn't exist.
Okay, what's the argument? If something doesn't exist, it can't be used.
Yeah, because empirically, right, in the world when I go out and I do things, I can only utilize what exists. Like you pointed
That's
out,
just
I
question.
cannot
Oh my
eat a
God.
unicorn.
That's
You said
question
I cannot
begging.
eat a
That's
unicorn because a unicorn doesn't
that's
exist.
the argument you gave is question begging. It's circular. The argument you gave is
How
circular.
is it circular?
Thanks
It's
for that,
analogous.
Galaxy.
It's me showing you, okay, if here I cannot do something because it doesn't
How's your
exist,
argument
and then you're
circular?
saying, okay, that doesn't apply over here.
Your premise one is literally, your premise one was that you can't use things empirically that don't exist. And then your conclusion is you can't use something if it doesn't exist. It's
No, I'm just saying, because I can observe
question
it
begging.
doesn't apply over here, why would it then apply over here? That's the argument.
What? I'm trying to get the argument.
The argument is actually rather, if in nowhere else in reality can I utilize something that doesn't exist, why would it then be capable to be used in this sense? How does that make sense?
I'm not granting you that you can't use it. I'm trying to get the argument if it doesn't exist, you can't use it.
Brother, like, I don't know what you want me to tell you. That just doesn't make sense. How could you use something that doesn't exist?
I don't care if it doesn't make sense to you, right? You're a layman. I don't expect anything about philosophy to make sense to you. This whole time was just me. It was probably more difficult for me to navigate the conversation with you because you're really brain dead. I just want to understand if you have any reasons to support. That's not an ad hom. You should probably read philosophy before. Again,
you called me brain dead.
no,
you called me brain
that's not an ad hom. I'm sorry to inform you that's not what an ad hom is. No, an ad hom is an informal fallacy of, in lieu of an inference presented by an interlocutor, you attack the person themselves instead of the argument they presented. Right now, I'm trying to get an argument. Nope. Only when someone had rendered an argument and I instead attacked the person instead of the argument. I'm right now asking you what's the argument, and I'm making fun of the fact that you come in here confident and are beyond unequipped. You're the most shallow. You're like a middle schooler in terms of philosophical knowledge, literally. Like my little brother would probably have equal philosophical knowledge as you. Again, not an ad hom, and I explained how. If you want, I can literally read right now from like a philosophical encyclopedia how the definition of an ad hom I gave you is one that's accurate, and how it's trivially not the case I'm giving you an ad hom. Right? Because what it requires is you to produce an argument, and then instead of attacking the argument or addressing the argument, I'm attacking you. Right now, I'm not getting an argument, and I'm attacking you. Insults simplicator are not ad homs. Insults simplicator are not ad homs. Ad homs are when, in a dialectic, an interlocutor has faced you with good reasons or motivation, some epistemic motivation for some claim. And instead of attacking the motivation, I attack the person.
Are you going to give any epistemic principle that you abide by? That
you're supposed to be establishing. No, you're supposed to be establishing if something doesn't exist, it can't be used.
Because it doesn't exist. You can't use something that doesn't exist. It's not possible.
What's the argument, though? That's repeating the claim.
It does not exist.
Okay, it doesn't exist, obviously.
How can you act on something that doesn't exist?
That's a question. What's the argument? If something doesn't exist,
yeah, the question that's supposed to form into your brain. Well, actually, yeah, you're right. I cannot act on something that doesn't exist.
So you don't have
because there's, especially in a materialist universe, right? I assume you're a materialist.
Nope.
Okay, so I mean, then what is your worldview?
Like,
how can you
no,
argue?
What? Like almost no atheist in philosophy is a materialist.
So like, what is Jesus your basis? What is your worldview?
It don't matter. It don't.
It actually does.
That don't matter. It doesn't matter. No, I don't. No, you have to present an argument.
Yeah, to somebody who won't
so
justify
what's the argument?
What his presupposition is for his epistemological standard. You're not doing that.
Wait, if now you're making claims that I'm presupposing stuff again, and we already did this twice, we can ask what's the argument, and you'll fail for the third time. Do you have an argument on presupposing anything?
Yes, you're engaging in this conversation right now. You're presupposing that your words have meaning.
Transcendental.
You're presupposing that I have identity over time. You're presupposing that you can utilize reasoning, which has no empirical sense about it.
What's the argument on presupposing?
Those are all arguments, and you're just hand-waving
those aren't
arguments, saying, well, actually, no, no.
Those aren't arguments. Those are claims.
Because
no, they're claims.
You have to acknowledge that you're engaging in those things.
Those are claims. Those aren't arguments.
Yeah, and it's backed up by the fact that you're trying to refute the claim, meaning that you understand it, which means you presuppose that we can convey meaning using sentences, which is
understanding a statement that's asserted doesn't mean I have reason to think that statement's true.
Why is it the case that you and I, being separate minds, are able to convey meaning?
Look. Do you have any argument on presupposing anything?
Dude, you're just hand-waving everything.
Do you have any argument on presupposing anything?
Yeah, because of the fact that you're using it. You cannot use something that doesn't exist. And then you're going to say, well, why can't I? I asked
Okay,
you,
so
can
we're
you
just
on something?
we just reached a circle, right? Because now you don't have an argument for something to be used as to exist. And then you're saying that me using these stuff presupposes they exist, which you also don't have an argument for. So now we're at 2 stages of no argument, and we're going in circles with you repeating these without an argument. And you have
We're
close to
only going in
no
circles because you refuse to concede
philosophical
the
graph.
fact that you are utilizing these transcendental categories. That's the only reason it's circular. Because
Well,
you're
why
not
would I
actually being
concede?
honest
Why would I
in
concede?
admitting
I'm not being
that you're using
dishonest.
it.
Well, if you're going to make the claim I'm dishonest, that's something else I would suppose you don't have an argument for.
No, I'm making the
But in
claim
any
that you're
case,
dishonest on the basis that you refuse to concede that you're utilizing reasoning,
and
which you are
why would
doing
I
right now, because you're trying to reason.
and why would I concede to something I haven't been produced an argument in light of? Why would I do that? Look, atheism's
Because
true. I don't
it
have an
is
argument. Why
obvious.
won't you concede? Why won't you concede atheism's true? It's like you have to be
Yeah,
like
because
so brain dead.
that's not analogous. Because I'm not participating in
It's
atheism.
well,
Okay?
it is
You're
analogous because
participating in
it is
logic,
analogous
therefore
insofar.
you are presupposing logic.
It is analogous insofar as what is being done is that I'm making an assertion. I'm not giving an inference backing it. I'm saying why don't you just concede the proposition's true, whilst you've never presented reason for me to accept it. There's no argument in support of it.
Yeah, because you're the only one rejecting the reason. I'm telling you that because you use
You haven't
logic.
presented the
Hello,
reason.
hi. Because you use logic.
Hello, hi. You haven't
Because you
presented
use
the
logic,
reason.
it presupposes
Now you're just
existence.
lying. And that's
You're using
that's
it,
the
dude.
statement. That's the
How do
statement
you
that
know
I've
I'm
asked
lying?
for the
How do you
argument
know I'm
for.
lying? Are you reasoning
Wait,
that in your
that's
head, host?
sorry.
Are you
Wait,
reasoning that I'm lying?
that's the statement. That's the
You're
statement.
disingenuous.
That's
Are
the
you
statement.
reasoning?
That's the statement I asked for the argument for. To use logic
Yeah, and
means
I just
it
told
exists.
you.
What's the
Hello.
argument?
I just told
Hello.
you you're using it right now. So how
So
can
what's
you
the
come to the
argument? It
conclusion?
exists.
Are you going to listen? How can you come to the conclusion that I'm lying if you're not using reasoning?
Imagine I said to use logic means it doesn't exist. And I asked you, what's the argument if I use logic that means it doesn't exist? And you say you're using logic. Well, why? Okay, yeah, I'm using logic. Why would I think that means it doesn't exist? That's where I'm hung up. And just like you wouldn't accept the reasoning I offered you, that's principally the same reasoning you're doing. It's the inverse.
You haven't
That's
given me
the
reasoning.
point. Wow,
You're literally
brain blast.
avoiding
You got
because
it?
you know you don't have.
Oh my god.
You know you don't have a standard by which you can judge what is true and false. So that's why you're saying, let's not talk about my worldview.
And that's another
let's
claim
only
you
talk
can't
about you,
defend,
so I can say,
suppose, Thanks for the
yeah,
heart.
sure. You called me a liar, which means you have to reason in your brain that I'm a liar.
I'm
How
asking
did
you
come
what's
to
the
that reasoning?
argument. I'm asking you. No, we're not gonna
Answer the
no.
question. How did you come to
No,
the idea that
that's
I'm
a
a liar
pivot.
if you don't reason?
That's a pivot. What's
No,
the
it's actually
argument that
demonstrating that you do utilize
what?
reason.
No one's denying I'm using that I'm reasoning.
It
right
is
now.
actually demonstrating
I'm
that
asking
you
you.
use reason because you are able to reason
Nope.
that I'm a liar, right?
No one's denying that I'm
How can
reasoning
you
right
read?
now.
How can you come to the conclusion I'm a liar if you don't reason that?
What's the argument if something doesn't exist, you can't use it?
Because it's not observable anywhere else.
Okay, it's not observable. Why would I think if it's not observable that I can't use it?
Yeah, that's not what I said. I said that principle is not observable anywhere else.
What principle? What are you talking about? Principle?
The principle of acting on something that does not exist.
What are you talking about?
So if you believe you can utilize something that doesn't exist,
what is the principle of
then
acting?
that-
What is the principle of not acting on that which doesn't exist? Why would I accept the principle like that? Seems like question begging again. It seems like all
The
you're
fact
saying is
that
that
you're
it's
even sitting here
principally
arguing
true.
about whether or not you can use something that doesn't exist is ridiculous.
The question beggingness again.
I think that your worldview is ridiculous.
Well,
If
sure.
you're going
So
to
is the
honestly
worldview that has
say
no
that
argument
logic doesn't
supporting any
exist,
of
but I
them.
can still use it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's only just because you will refuse to concede and refuse to steelman your own position. Like, this is just super disingenuous.
I'm most definitely disingenuous. Wait. I just want to be clear. What is the thing you think I'm disingenuous about? Using logic
So 3 times
and
I've
it not
asked you,
existing?
3
Wait, you think
times I've
that's the
asked you,
disingenuous thing?
do you think that reasoning and logic exist? You said to me, no, reasoning and logic doesn't
Yeah,
exist.
I don't
Then
think
pointed out
logic
to you,
exists.
You
Yeah.
just made a universal claim. You just made a universal claim that logic doesn't exist. That's not a personal claim. That's a universal claim because it's outside of yourself. You're saying, in reality, logic does not exist. However, I can utilize this non-existent thing. That's a universal claim, which has to be arrived at using reasoning, which means you're presupposing reasoning and logic in the conclusion you made based on the fact that you are able to reason. The question I'm asking you is a metalogical question.
That's just circular. That's not
You can just keep saying,
metalogical.
it's a metalogical question. How do you arrive
You
at
don't
the
know.
fact that
Oh my god, you have no clue anything about metalogic.
Yeah, so
Can you name?
have not given any
Can you name?
steelman for
Can you
any
name?
teaching of how
Can you
it
name?
works.
Can you
Said that
name?
You don't know. You don't
Can
know.
you name?
You don't know.
Can you name one Can you name one metalogical principle?
I'm not going to do
In, cla-
this.
in
Address the question.
No. Don't act like you know what you're saying, and then when
Yeah,
faced
because
with
you
a
can't
question
address it. There's a
to
reason
test
you're
your
avoiding it.
knowledge, you just run away.
There's a reason you're avoiding it, dude.
You said you're asking me a meta. You said you're asking a metalogical question, right? Name one
metalogical question I asked you.
Okay, I don't want you to repeat it.
What
I don't
is
want you to
your
repeat it.
epistemological standard?
That's not even a metalogical
That's because you
question.
can't.
Jesus Christ. Okay, pipe down. I want to know if you can name one metalogic principle in classical logic. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not playing along because you will not answer my questions.
Okay, well, we're going in circles and you're like completely brain fried. You have no concept of what you're talking about. Have a great one. That was awful. The pre-suppers are always the ones who are like so out of so out of depth, so out of touch with reality, so out of touch with philosophy. It's disgusting. Hey, what's up? Do you have an argument? Hey, do you have an argument God exists?
Hey, what's up, man? I'm 23 years old, and I respect your argument, but at the same time, can you prove it to me that God doesn't exist?
I'm asking. Okay, do you have an argument God exists?
Yes, I do.
What's the argument?
So everything that surrounds you, if you look at Mother of Nature,
So
is everything that is created perfectly. Would you disagree that there is a creator?
Created? What do you mean by created? That there's a cause for everything?
A God. What's the definition of a God?
I'm asking what you mean by created.
No, I'm asking you though. What's the definition of a God?
Yeah, so let's just try and calm down and wait turns, right? Presumably we answer questions in a preliminary fashion, right? So I asked the question of what you mean by created first, so we can go one question at a time. Is that fine?
Yeah,
I don't want you to spurg out on me. Like you clearly.
I'm not being disrespectful to you.
Yeah, but you like demanded that you.
No, I didn't demand it. But if you're making a statement right now,
you literally said you didn't demand it. You literally said no. Answer the question. What I mean by
you
God.
realize that
That's
you're
not
making
a
a
demand.
statement right now, and I'm disagreeing with you.
Look, what do you mean by creation? Do you just mean everything around me has a cause?
No, I'm asking you. What is your point of view of disagreeing that there is a creator?
I'm asking you. Oh my God, these people. Look, you said the reason I think there's a God is because everything. You said the reason I think the reason I think there's a God is because everything around me is created. What do you mean?
I'm being dead serious. Like, what's your point of view of believing that there is no God or slash creator?
But that question is coming after the fact. I asked mine. So
would you realize that it's not a fact, it's a personal opinion?
It's orthogonal to informing me. What we need is an answer to the question.
Okay,
so the question on the table. What's my answer?
Yeah, what's your answer? How can you prove that God does not exist or there is not a creator?
No. You're doing it again. We're going to answer questions in an orderly fashion. We're still on my question. I had not yet received an answer, so we're not going to hone in onto other questions.
Okay, I understand you're invested. If you make a statement, you got to back it up.
I understand you're invested in other questions. Just be patient. What do you mean by created?
I mean, at the same time, you are literally saying I will destroy any argument of God's existence.
That's not an answer.
No. I'm trying to prove your point. What's your statement?
Prove my point. I'm asking you a question.
Okay, so how can you believe that God does not exist or slash a creator?
Last time you overtalked me and dodged the question.
That's fine.
You do it again, I'm just going to drop you.
That's fine.
Try and use your reasoning and listening ears. We're clearly on a question, and every time I ask it, and instead you invite a new question, you should be aware that's not an answer.
Okay.
What's your favorite type? What's your favorite type?
Monkey boy. Okay.
What's your favorite type of cake?
Let me ask you a question.
You're doing it again. I'm going to mute you this time. Next time you're getting dropped in sincerity. If I ask someone, what's your favorite type of cake? And he responds, what type of dog do you have? I'm not informed what his favorite type of cake is. So we're going to go question by question. That's fine. You said it was fine. What do you mean by created?
I mean, I'm trying to prove your point that you are saying that I'll destroy any argument.
Look, I understand you're doing meta right now, and I said I was going to give you one last time.
You can't be truthful right now.
All I want is an answer. Now, if you can't answer it, you're getting dropped. What do you mean by created?
So what's your point of view on the Big Bang Theory?
Go to hell. That guy was obnoxious. What? It was literally a 5-minute roundabout for one question. What he meant by a word.
What's good? I'm a bit sick right now.
No, you're good. What? Do you have an argument God exists?
Well, yeah, it's the only reasonable explanation for our existence.
It's the only reasonable explanation.
For our existence.
Why would I think it's... Well, let's first get... Why would I think the God explanation is a reasonable one?
Well, because... Let's just... Matter, for an example. Matter can't be created itself, and it can't be destroyed. Energy. Energy can't be created or destroyed. So you start to ask the question, where does energy itself
I'm not sure that's true. I'm pretty sure scientifically that has to...
I said
well, if it can't... Well, wait, but look. There's a lot of I'm not one who's well informed in science.
Yeah.
But in science, this concept about energy can't be created or destroyed only applies to a closed system, right?
Yeah. Well,
so
that's why I say God is outside of that system. Something outside of that system cause that system.
So then that just means energy can be created. And if you think God is what explains
inside of the sort of, yes. Unless it's something
you just clearly incur a contradiction if what you want to say is God's the explanation
it's not.
For energy. Well, there is. If you want to say God's the explanation for energy, which means energy is created, and it's principally true, energy can't be created, then you just get energy can and can't be created. And that's just clearly a contradiction.
Energy cannot be created in a closed system or in But if God is outside of that closed system, or
Okay, so then what
outside
was
of
the point of
laws
even
physics,
bringing that up?
he will
What was the
cause
point of bringing that up? So what
because
was the
God
point
is
of
outside
bringing
of
it
the
up?
laws of physics.
What was the point of bringing it up?
Because God is outside of the laws of physics, so He could
Well,
create
okay,
energy.
he's outside the laws of physics. What was the point in bringing up energy can't be created or destroyed?
Why else would energy exist?
You're so dumb. If we share the view that the universe is an open
No,
system.
so I'm asking you a question. Why else would energy exist?
What?
Why else would energy exist?
Whoa, calm down. So what's not in contention is that the universe is an open system, and actually that is controversial. I don't even understand the scientific jargon about systems and stuff. So I'm not even sure that's something I would agree to, but I can grant you that for the sake of argument. We can entertain that the universe is an open system. In that case, what was the point of bringing up energy can't be created in a closed system? What was the point of that? If we're not talking about closed system, it's irrelevant.
God is outside of the universe, so He's the only reason. What?
Great, good job. You get a cookie. Great job. You're not tracking at all what I'm saying, but you know what? Let's just move past it because you're really slow. Okay, cookie.
No, it seems like
okay,
you're
God's
slow.
out.
You're not
God's
understanding what I'm
outside.
saying.
Yeah. I'm not. Yeah, I'm a slow boy. Yeah, I'm not getting what you're saying. That's correct. Yeah. So God is out. Yeah. Great job. So God's outside the universe. What you said? The only reasonable explanation is God. Why is God a reasonable explanation?
Because that's the only reason why energy exists. Why else would energy exist?
I'm not understanding how is it a reasonable explanation?
There is no other what caused energy? So I ask you the question: what caused energy to exist?
No, that's not how that works.
No,
we
so
want to
I'm
get clear.
Well, I'm asking you, what caused energy to
Nope,
exist?
that's not how that works. We need to get clear why you think it's reasonable.
Because
we're not talking.
wait. I know.
Wait.
I'm asking you a question because I want to learn.
Wait. Nope. From now on, I'm gonna start holding people on shorter leashes if you're gonna act like this. This is just like you don't even agree to this. This is just straight up stupidity. Imagine someone says they found a grilled cheese in the desert, right?
Yeah.
And the guy says, "I think the only reasonable explanation is that grilled cheese unicorns did it." And then I say, "Well, I don't see how that's
God is much more broader than
pipe your ass down.
You need to calm down and try to listen for once.
I'm calm.
You just interrupted about
me.
What is your...
Listen. So imagine we're in a scenario. You're the one interjecting. I haven't finished you don't even know what I'm saying. So pipe down. Imagine we're in a scenario where there's a slice of grilled cheese on the desert floor. Someone says the only reasonable explanation is grilled cheese unicorns. And I say, well, I don't even see how grilled cheese unicorns are a reasonable explanation. And then that person gives me the inquisition. Well, what's your explanation for it? That's an improper move, right? I'm not informed why I would think grilled cheese unicorns are Whoa, you're over talking. I'm not done. Let me land the plane. So what it doesn't show is that I'm now informed how his explanation is reasonable. And instead, he's shifting for me to produce a contrastive explanation.
Okay.
For one, I don't need any. I can have no explanation.
You're going on a rant, buddy. Get to your point.
Whoa.
Get to your point, buddy. Hurry.
This is the point.
You're ranting.
Everything I said was not using extra words. This is all pertinent. Look, if you think I'm ranting, you could just get dropped because nothing I'm saying is ranting. You're not listening. How about this? Can you reproduce what I've said thus far?
I don't have to.
I didn't say you have to.
Can you reproduce what I just said this far?
No, because you said everything I said was.
You can't, and I can't. So what point are you trying to make?
Wait.
What point are you trying to make?
You just said.
Wait. No, I'm not gonna wait.
Oh, you're not gonna wait? Then you could just get dropped. You're like a waste of time. You're obviously not here in good faith. You're like an absolute artwork. Jesus Christ. Next person. Can we tap the screen to share the live? We need more people. Yeah, he's not listening. Hey, do you have an argument God exists?
Yes, I do, and I actually have proof.
You sound like Kaysen.
Who?
Okay, you're not. Maybe you're not. Okay. Yeah, what's the argument?
It's before I just want to make sure you know math. There's mathematical proof.
Wait, is this Kaysen?
Mathematical education. What's your highest mathematical education?
Wait, you're not. Wait. This isn't Kaysen. Wait, can someone here confirm this is not Kaysen? Trey? Because I'm not here to get trolled. Okay, whatever. Mob is here too. I don't know if this is Kaysen, but let's say I have no mathematical education.
Then it would be completely lost on you, but I could still explain it anyway.
Well, what's the argument? I don't know. You're asking me questions about my education.
Well, it's not an argument because it's undeniable. It's a proof. But I just wanted to make sure that you were ready for it.
So wait, what? I'm asking you if you have an argument God exists. Is the answer yes or no?
I have proof God exists.
So that would be an argument. The answer would be yes.
Well, because it's not. It's proof. There's no.
So if it's a proof, it's an argument.
It's math. You how much math do you know?
If it's a mathematical proof, you can render it in an argument.
Proofs aren't arguments. They're proofs.
Proofs can be rendered as arguments, yes.
Rendered? What do you...
If it's a mathematical proof, so the mathematical scheme is axiomatic, then what you can do is you can give the axioms and you can give them in a premise sequence where the conclusion is the theorem that's proven. That's trivial. If it's a type of alternative arithmetic, like a logic, if you're using like natural deduction, you can use introduction and elimination rules, and you can infer theorems the same way. So yes, of course, for any proof, whether it's any arithmetic, logic, math, anything, you can of course regiment it into an argument. So you can render it as an inference. All mathematical formulas are inferences, or at least, well, not a standalone mathematical inference or formula. A string of mathematical formulas is an inference, which thereby is an argument. So you're just lost about the math stuff. Maybe I should be asking you about your, maybe I should be asking you about your mathematical knowledge, because this is like, this is very, okay, great. So what's the mathematical proof?
So, do you understand tensor calculus?
No.
All right.
Just give me the proof.
You don't understand the math, so I can't.
Just give me the proof.
I'll give it to you, but it's going to be lost. Maybe someone in the chat will give it. You ready? So
just give it.
Well, okay. It's 4 fundamental forces of reality: gravity, electromagnets.
I don't think those are forces of reality. That's number one. But maybe you're not saying. Maybe you don't know like philosophy, so maybe you're saying something that's not as controversial as I think it is. So let's just, unless I later have reason to suspect you are philosophically inclined. I don't know what saying that was doing, but all I'm saying is. You don't know what do you think I'm saying is controversial right now? It's not that a God exists. You're saying something else that's controversial.
No, I'm proving.
Remember? Oh my God, you're slow. You said there's 4 fundamental forces of reality. That's what you said. And I'm understanding. If you're philosophically layman, then using existential language as you do is actually not ontologically committing in the way I think it is, because when it's spoken by folk people, they don't even understand realist devices. So if you're actually philosophically inclined, what you're saying is extremely controversial. If you're not philosophically inclined, I have reason to suspect that you're not saying anything that's very much more controversial than I would think, because the layman semantics is one, or sorry, the layman language is one where they tend to use ontological language all over the place and they're not actually saying what I think them to be saying. But in any case, that's all I was saying. And then you kind of just didn't track what I was saying and was saying other stuff. But that's my whole point. All I was saying is if I have reason to think you're philosophically inclined, I'm not going to accept there's any forces of reality. But since I have yet not reason, I'm just going to entertain, okay, there's 4 forces of reality, so what?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, I'm not philosophically. So if I say like world or necessary, I'm not talking about the philosophical stuff.
Then if you're going to use words like necessity, it's likely not. We can see how far it goes, but then that's this like
probably won't, but I just
necessary language.
I'm just using it colloquially.
Okay, well, if you're not philosophically inclined, you're just, even if no matter how whatever knowledge you have in any field, you're probably not equipped for this conversation, but that's fine.
No, I 100%.
So, no, if you don't have basic understanding of devices and philosophy, then you're not equipped.
I know the laws of logic and stuff. And
do you?
Like metaphysics.
What do you?
And
oh, really?
Some ontology.
What do you think the laws of logic are? Like in classical logic, for example.
I wouldn't know the laws, but there's like stuff like, it's just like, when you, because it doesn't, look, that doesn't matter. I'm giving the mathematical proof. I made a claim.
Yeah, I'm not convinced you know anything about it.
I don't think there are laws of logic.
There. What do you think the laws of logic even are, though? There are laws of logic. Okay, so you're just talking out your ass at this point. Yes, give the proof.
Okay, so the 4 fundamental forces: gravity, electromagnetism, strong force, and the weak force. So each one of them is represented by simple its tensors. The world language is expressed in tensors of the world. And
sorry, the world language?
The language of the world is tensors. Right.
I don't know what that. Wait, I don't understand what that expression's even saying.
The strong force.
The world language is tensors.
Gluon field. Right. The weak force.
I'm not understanding what you're saying. Are you just saying there's some way you can express these forces?
I'm just giving you some background because you said you didn't know tensor calculus.
Yeah, I'm not understanding what you're saying right now.
It's unfortunate. So.
No, you're not. It doesn't seem you're attempting to inform me what you're saying. I'm clearly asking you what this expression means, and then instead of answering what you mean by the expression, you just said, I'm explaining these concepts because you said you didn't understand calculus. It's like if I said, well, what is... Yeah, at this point, I have really good reason to think you're a troll, so you might not last any much longer. Let's just try and progress through the argument.
Thanks.
What is the argument?
The argument, in very clear nutshell, it boils down to these, it's a bunch of derivatives, and they cancel out the derivatives equals to 0, which proves a constant, and that constant must be the creator. It must be represented through the tensor.
Wait, let's say, well, what is it's a mathematical constant or what? Like a physical constant?
There's a bunch of derivatives of certain tensor indices, and they evaluate to 0, which would represent...
I don't know what that's saying. Are you saying yes or no? Look, let's just go yes or no. Is the 0... Okay, I don't know what that's saying.
The derivative...
Look, there's a constant. Look, you're saying there's a constant, right?
Yes.
Am I correct? Okay, is it a natural constant?
It's a constant that's not a product of the fundamental forces, but rather of reality.
It's a mathematical constant?
Yes, it's constant. The derivative is 0.
Okay, so there's a mathematical constant. We're up. I'm tracking so far, right? There's a mathematical constant.
Yes, derived from all 4 tensors.
Okay, so there's some derivation from tensors. I'm not sure what that means.
Tensor is just a mathematical object. It's used for the calculations.
So there's mathematical objects you could derive the constant from. Okay, so there's this constant. Why would I think there's a God?
Because the constant, if there were no God, because at some point in the calculation, we account for an external force beyond the 4 fundamental ones. And
why would there have to be an external force?
Because without it, the equations come out to undefined. That's what's...
Okay, so the equations come out to... Okay, wait. So the equations come out to undefined without an external force. So yes. What? So what?
Or either the mathematics are wrong, or a God exists.
Yeah, so why would I not think the math's wrong?
Because the math has been verified experimentally tons of times.
I don't know what it means to experimentally. I don't take it maths are the type of things you can experiment on. But in any case, if all you're saying is that, okay, yeah, so there's some math of physics. Okay, so it's been experimented, updated in a rigorous way in which we have very robust tenets of math, where from those tenets, we can do some type of proof and generate a constant, right? Okay, and why would I think that's more likely than that being false than a God existing? Do you know Bayesian calculus? Because we could talk about the relevant calculus here. What we would have to consider is the datum conditional on the antecedent probability of the proposition, God existing, versus math being wrong. Okay, well, what's the bare probability of theism? Well, there's a couple of things. If I'm entertaining, there is a prior probability of theism. The prior probability of theism would be astronomically low. It would be, in fact, in such a trivial inductive way, it would be astronomically low. It's like infinitesimal. It's like close to 0 in a relevant way. And if you're talking in context of the framework of induction, there's some relevant way you can say it's actually a probability of 0 that there's a God. But if you're just talking more broadly, where the epistemic probabilistic framework in question allows for 0 to be some type of something false tautologically false. So we have a background logic. What we would need is the priors in that probability of that proposition. So if we're gonna act as if God is something I have in my priors or could have a prior probability about, it would be probably infinitesimal or some astronomically low number. But the thing is, I think they're fundamentally divorced from your priors, because I think definitionally, or maybe rather you can say analytically or a priori, it's true. You can't have priors about supernatural entities, such that the prior probability of it is in some way 0 or indeterminate given you don't have priors. So from there, the posterior update introduces no probability. So from there, you actually can't make any probabilistic assessment given you don't have priors to even, conditional datum, you can update the probability. So that's just confusion there. But the thing is, let's say you can. My priors in theism is astronomically lower than my priors in mathematical systems being errors, in which we construct auxiliary principles or auxiliary additions or conditions to the mathematical framework in which we revise our math, right? Historically, this has been done thousands of times mathematically. So I do have priors about there being updates to mathematical frameworks, even when they're in some historical standing, very rigorous, right? So I can imagine it's actually not unlikely that in this current day and age, with our rigorous tentative understanding of math, that it gets updated as insofar as we see it now. Now, I have, on one interpretation, there's no way you can say the probability of God is even something we can consider. Or I would say that the probability in God existing is probably one of the least likely things, right? Because I have no priors about there being supernatural entities. Because trivially, you can't observe. You can't have them in your priors. So have something in your priors. Minimally, you have to have relevant objects in your prior web of experience that make it up. Like imagine, I've never actually observed a penny, but I have observed copper. I have observed maybe Abraham Lincoln. I've observed configurations of things. Maybe I've seen Chuck E. Cheese coins. And those relevant facts contribute to how likely is it there's a coin that's made of copper with the engraving of Lincoln in some configuration, right? We can assess the probability in a Bayesian way, that way. Now, supernatural entities are something that are almost just like true by definition. They're not perceptual, right? Supernatural things are aspatial. God is aspatial. God doesn't exist in the natural world. He created the natural world, exists outside of it. He's spaceless and timeless. Okay, then if we're working with our basic tentative understanding of perceptual theories, we understand perception to be the capturing of information using sensory faculties, which require in the relata objects. Now, if in the relata the object and the standard control of an object is something that's spatially extended, Well, if it's aspatial, it's definitionally not spatially extended. Okay, so you can't have priors about it. But if you can't have priors about it, there's no way we can evaluate any probability towards the proposition. Okay, if we can't assess the probability of the proposition, then we can't reason evidentially about God. Okay, well, in fact, if you read standard philosophy of religion, it's funny, evidential arguments are the most frowned upon apologism for theism by apologists themselves. They don't use evidential arguments. They traditionally use cosmological arguments or types of a priori reasoning for that exact reason. So look, I gave you a criticism. I'm not sure how well you appreciated it. It is very nuanced. We might need to go step by step through it. But there's two things. There's an uncharitable criticism where we can just say we can't even evaluate the probability of God. So you can't even make a probabilistic judgment about the probability God exists contrastive to the probability our current tentative mathematical framework is errored. Or on the other horn, the less crude criticism is one where theism is probably the least likely thing in my background. It's probably the most unlikely thing to happen, right? And there's also a bunch of heuristics going for math, right? It cooperates with known background information, right? Historical information, right? It integrates with the histories and anthropologies of math, where we know math has been updated and added auxiliary principles and modulations to the framework to update it in error. It's not like this is something not known that math has been errored, and there's been significant updates historically to maths to accommodate a number of mathematical tensions. Okay, well, I do have strong priors there. Math has been errored in the past. That's good inductive support to think, math is errored now. I have zero priors. No one has priors of there being.
You've been going for 10 minutes.
Okay, do you understand anything I'm saying?
I was listening for the first, you were completely ignoring everything.
Okay, well, I already gave you...
I didn't want to do it because you didn't understand the math, because you were just going to say, oh, it gives me an answer I don't like, therefore it must be wrong. And you just wasted my time.
That's not...
I could show you that.
It seems like you're very disingenuous.
There's nothing wrong with it. It's proof. It's an actual proof based on axioms that I'm sure you would accept. All right. It's just you don't like the outcome.
So you didn't understand. I'm waffling. Really, I'm waffling.
Yes, you took me to like purgatory.
So did you appreciate anything I said?
Did I appreciate it? No. It was insulting, honestly.
Do you know what I mean by? I'm asking you if you captured anything I said. Is there anything you understood? Is there anything you understood from what I said?
I said a bunch of random garbage about probabilities.
So you didn't understand any of my criticism?
Because it wasn't about anything I said. You just went on.
That's false.
Look.
Really? Now you're just being a dishonest piece of crap. To say that I never addressed anything you said is just a lie.
You didn't like the outcome, and now you're mad about it. I could show you the calculation.
I'm mad about it? I'm mad about the fact I just went in a very nuanced way giving you a criticism about Bayesian calculus and how this argument is actually offers reason to think that it's not a...
I wasn't talking about that. You just completely pivoted to other things.
I didn't. What did I pivot to?
Bayesian calculus. I told you. I don't know what that is.
That's not a pivot.
And it's not relevant to what I was giving.
It is relevant.
I gave you a proof based in tensor calculus.
Wait. Since you want to claim what I said, since you want to claim what I said was irrelevant, can you explain how it's irrelevant?
Because I didn't understand
how it's a pivot.
I understand stuff that's relevant. I understand.
Well, are you going to be disingenuous? Wait. So you think if someone communicates something and you don't understand it, it follows what's said by them that you don't understand is irrelevant? No, it can be very relevant, and you can. So then, why would you say that as a reason? Do you think that's how? Do you think that follows?
Bring up anything in tensor calculus, which makes sense because you didn't actually hear the proof. You just got mad about it.
Wait.
Because you weren't going to understand the proof.
Wait. I don't need to disagree with the proof. And in fact, I wasn't critiquing the proof. I was making a Bayesian criticism of the proof, where even if I grant you the proof, there's another relevant facet of reasoning to consider that mitigates the argument, which I gave you extensively. You didn't even listen to it, then said it's irrelevant, and then you don't even understand what I was saying, but never attempted to clarify. Why don't you go to hell?
That is insulting.
You're clearly a dishonest. Yeah, go to hell. You're a dishonest piece of crap. You're wasting my time. You don't understand anything. You don't understand anything. You don't understand Bayesian calculus yourself. You don't understand anything. You didn't listen to what I said. You don't understand basic philosophy, and you want to come here arguing for theism. You're a Nimrod, right? You're a dishonest piece of crap. Get out of here. Go to hell. Dude, you're complete R word. You're not intelligent. You're not honest either. Jesus Christ. I can't believe this moron was acting condescending about knowing calculus. Then I gave him a criticism. He didn't even listen to it. Then said it's irrelevant. Saying that because if I don't listen to a criticism, it follows it's irrelevant. That's the most moronic thing I've ever heard. And I can't even, like my brain hurts the fact that there's people that brain dead and dishonest. It's disgusting, filthy. Go to hell. Sorry, do you have an argument God exists?
So do you believe in God or no?
No.
Okay, because I heard you say Jesus Christ. And I'm not saying that's God.
People say that all the time.
That's just the same that you just said.
Okay.
Huh? That's just something you said.
Okay.
It's a habit. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Now, I was kind of where you were, right? When it came to God and having evidence and stuff like
Well, look,
that.
we don't want like a whole biography. I just want to know if you have an argument there's a God. If the answer
Okay.
is no, then
Yes. The God exists because the Bible did not say that God wasn't real. It said that God has a face. It said that God walks, God talks, God does everything. So it says that God is a living God and God is real.
okay. But
So it's a
I'm
real
asking you.
God. Huh?
Okay, I'm asking you if you have an argument that a God exists.
Oh, do I have? No, I don't have an argument. I know God exists. I thought you were saying the opposite. Yeah, God exists, most definitely.
So you don't have an argument.
No, I mean, I know God exists and I can prove it.
How do you prove it?
I mean, just look in the mirror. God exists. Look at everything around you, right?
What if an atheist said, "Look in the mirror. Look all around you.
Mhm.
Obviously, a God doesn't exist."
No, then that would be crazy because then I would
It's
have to
as
ask the atheist. I said, okay, if that's what
look.
you believe,
The point is that that's as malnourished of a reason as you're giving, right? In fact, it's
no, I
mirroring
can't
what
prove
you're
that
saying and
because
just
the
changing it for
atheist can't
atheism.
prove what everything who created everything around them, including themselves. I can.
Why?
He
Well,
can't. He can't, but
well,
I can. That's what
when I
I'm
asked
saying.
you, yeah, when I asked you what's the proof was look in the mirror, look around you. Not only is that not a proof, that's a
Because you were
command,
created. The reason why I
but
said that is because you were created by something very highly intelligent that is not only a creator, it's a creator, it's
wait,
a designer. Hold on. And then it
okay.
brings order to its design. Now, something that is
What's
not
the argument? There's
nothing
a designer.
because we're designed. There's a design
What's
to
the argument we're
who we
designed?
are. There's a design to who we are, and there's an order to who we
Thanks for the
are.
heart, Emma. Okay,
Huh?
but what's the argument we're designed?
We are designed. You can look. We got two eyes. We
Yeah,
got
but
one
that's
nose.
not an art.
That's
Wait,
design.
surely.
Hold on. When I design something, I'm specific about what it is. Now, if I'm not designing, I'll just throw some paint up on a wall, and then it may show something, but it's not a design. But a design is specific. Like when I'm designing anything, my earrings, my clothes, I'm being very
I
specific.
understand. I
So
understand.
it's a designer. Hmm.
I'm asking you. Why would I think there's a designer for us?
Because you're a design of the designer. That's why you have hair on your head. You got two eyebrows. You got two eyes. You got
I'm
one.
sorry. This is like not gonna go anywhere at all.
Yo, what's going on, man?
What's up? Do you have an argument God exists?
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever heard this before, and if you did, I still run the argument a bit different, but it's the ontological. Did my mic
Pause.
go out? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, it's the ontological argument for God.
Well, which one?
Well,
The ontological arguments are always like question begging, anyways.
yeah. Well, I can give you the syllogism now if you would like.
Sure.
Yeah, well, premise one is there's going to be no contradictions in existence for a maximal great being defined as contributing the attributes of omniscience, which is, all-knowing, and omnipotence, which is all-powerful. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Well, if you're just defining it that way, what is there to disagree with?
I'm saying, no, the claim from premise one is there's no logical contradictions that exist within a God who has those two attributes.
Okay.
Okay, and premise two is going to be if it's possibility just means like something that's logical, right? Like if something's logical, then it's possible. Something's illogical, it's impossible. So premise two is that if it's possible for such a being to exist, then its being exists in at least one possible world, right? You agree that it's at least possible for this being to exist since he's logical.
Yeah.
Premise three, if this being exists in any possible world, then by definition it must exist in all possible worlds, for maximal greatness entails necessary existence, like how 2 + 2 is necessarily equaling 4.
When you say necessary existence, what do you mean? Are you saying it's the
Yeah.
definition of maximal greatness?
No, it's just what maximal greatness entails, or maximally great being, when you're referencing like a
Yeah,
theological
so-
God. But necessary
Yeah,
existence
yeah.
is like when something has to exist that way in every other possible world. Like for an example, in mathematics, 2 + 2 = 4. Like unless you tamper with the cardinals there, right? That is going to be a necessary truth. Meaning it doesn't matter what properties of the universe.
I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this faces the same thing with all like ontological arguments. If you understand maximally great to be one that existence is a predicate of, then all you're saying is that the predicates, the relevant set of predicates that are not existence, are ones that are instantiated in the actual world. That's what it means to be ontic, and then that just becomes dubious, right? So even if we define God to be one that has all those properties, that's fine. I'm fine with using existence as a predicate. If you bake that in, then there's no. You would still need to produce an argument that there exists something that satisfies those predicates.
Well, the whole point is that if this God is necessary, which you didn't disagree with him being we didn't disagree with any logical contradictions applying to this God. So you'd have to be saying that this God's at least logical, which means that he exists in one possible world, right?
I understand what you're saying, but all it's saying there is that it's baking in that analytically the being is in the actual world, and that just becomes something controversial.
Well, I'm not saying. So what do you mean by he's in the actual world?
Do you know what? a possible versus the actual world?
Oh yeah, actual. Well, I'm not saying that. I'm not making that he's in the actual world from premise one.
Well, that's
to
what it means to exist, right? From being maximally great, you're saying he exists. What it means to exist is to be in the actual world.
That's not true. So there's going to be different states
What?
of existence in reality, right? Like there's
What does that mean?
concrete existence, abstract existence, conceptual
I don't think.
existence.
I don't. First, I have no clue what what's the demarcation
Oh,
between abstract and
and
conceptual.
conceptual. Yeah, I got you. So
And I don't think abstract things exist.
yeah, sure. Well, are you a materialist?
No.
Okay. So when you're holding to different states of existence, right? There's going to be a distinction in the way in which they exist or subsist, right? There are hypostases, like they have being.
Oh my God.
There's distinctions between how they exist, and the
Now you're
difference
using
between.
the Aristotelian metaphysic.
Well, these are more universal, broader terms. You can find these in every.
That's not true.
Yeah, you can find these words linguistically applied in every worldview. They just have different definitions.
No, that's not true.
Can you?
If you want to make that
Yeah.
claim, you can maybe give some empirical support. But
Yeah.
in any case, I'm not even interested in talking about that. That's just blatantly not true.
Well, all I'm saying is like under the context of the premises I'm laying out here, right? When you say God has
No, that's
existed,
the language. That language is used standardly. In fact, you said in all worldviews.
I said
that
it's
language is
universal.
used. That's just not true.
Yeah, well, you
That
can
language is not used. That is not prevalent language.
well, you can use that language in any way in which you speak, right? There's
No,
not
that
going to be an
language is-
objectively correct way to speak, no matter what context it is.
I'm not. I don't know what you're talking about now. Now you're bringing this to like normativity about.
I'm
like,
not.
using
You just said that
language.
that's not a standard way of
I'm
speaking.
not-
I don't see how that brings any relevance.
Yeah. Well, you want to say that it's used universally.
Yeah, I said you can use them universally. I argued the
Oh,
possibility.
well, no one disagrees. You can use any word universally. I can use the
Yeah.
word dog to refer to unicorn and say that I can use that universally.
Exactly. So, but when you
Okay,
insinuated I was talking about
well,
Aristotelian,
well, I don't know
worldview-
why you would even mention that then. Well, that
Well,
doesn't.
I'm trying to
that's
explain
not
it
even
to you, right?
interesting.
Because when you said
Well,
anything
that wouldn't be
that-
informing me of anything.
well, you said anything that exists is in the actual world, like it has actualization. But I disagree, right? Like conceptual things like Spider-Man exists conceptually, but they're not actualized.
Yeah, you're just using a different ontological semantics.
I'm not. So I'm saying
You are. Well,
you're saying
obviously
anything
you
that
are. What do you mean?
exists.
No, I'm not.
You said anything that exists is actualized. It's
Yeah,
metaphysically. That's metaphysically
just true by
incorrect.
definition.
It's metaphysically
What is
incorrect.
metaphysically incorrect as opposed to metaphysically correct? What's metaphysical correctness?
Well, yeah. So metaphysical correctness would mean that it's in line with what metaphysics represents, which is anything that's logical and can be demonstrated in
Yeah,
reality.
but then that's just you saying that it's outside of your metaphysic, right?
No, that's
And I
not
don't
what I'm
care
saying.
about that.
No, you're
Then what-
trying to say that I'm just like playing
Then
linguistic
if
word
you're
games,
saying
right?
then if you're
But-
saying there's metaphysical norms outside of the background of metaphysical commitments you have, then I have no clue what the hell you're saying.
wait, you're going off track. Well, what I'm telling you is that you're trying
going
to say
off
I'm
track.
playing linguistic games when I'm using this wordage, right?
I never even said you're playing linguistic.
Not
I never
verbatim.
even
I
made
said-
that charge.
not
No, I never
verbatim.
made a charge similar to that.
Yes, you did. You
All
said
I said.
Go ahead.
No, what did I say?
You said something about what I was doing was just changing the wordage in which I'm applying to the concept that we're referencing here, right? But that's just not true.
I don't even know what that's saying, and I'm not sure I've ever said anything close to that. If
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
talking about in the premise when I said if you just bake in existence into what it means for something to be maximally great, and I understand what it means for something to be ontic is to be in the actual world, which has nothing to do with this ontological pluralism
No,
you're talking
no.
about.
What I'm talking
Where
about
things
when,
can exist abstractly.
about when I
concretely.
said
none of that matters because
so you said when
those
something
would still
exists
exist in the actual world.
when you said
Or
when
sorry,
something
those would
exists
still be in the actual world to
Yeah,
exist. No,
when you said something exists, it would exist in the actual world, right? And I said that's not true. And then I told you like Spider-Man's going to exist.
what does it mean? But what does exist there mean then?
Exist is to be, right? Being.
What does to be mean?
To be?
Yeah, what does to be mean?
Of.
What is a positive state of?
No, to posit a state of, right? So there's like
What does
potential
that mean?
actual. This
Oh my
would just mean
God.
that you're any type of
This
hypothesis.
is just more garbage Aristotelian metaphysics. Look,
Listen,
the point
man, listen.
the point is if I don't know what you mean by existence. Then I have no clue what you're even saying.
Yeah. So
I
everything.
think this ontological pluralist view is like gibberish. So
No, like everything, like reality is going to be defined as everything that's real. Real is going to be defined as anything with a state of existence, and there's going to be plurality of states in existence: conceptual, abstract, and concrete, right? And that's what the actualization is. What you're talking about.
I don't
But
know what
those had
exists
nothing to
means
do
in
with
your
my.
view.
Those had nothing to do with my syllogism I gave, right?
Yeah, but
Which is, you were saying that, like for an example, possible
you
worlds.
said a maximally great being exists. I don't know what exist there means. I have no
Yeah,
concept.
no. I said okay. So I said it's possible for a maximal great being to exist in at least one
I
possible
don't-
world.
Yeah,
So
I don't know what that means. I don't know.
Oh,
what
you should have asked
exist
for
there means.
verification. I got you, man. There's no problem.
I've asked that like 20
So-
times. You just
So
you just
possible
clown.
worlds. Yeah. So when I said premise one, there's no.
I'm asking you what you mean by exist. I don't know what that.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
means.
So when I said premise one,
Okay.
there's no illogical contradictions with the said maximally great God that possesses these two attributes. Basically, if there's no logical contradictions, it means that this being, in concept at least, is
Okay.
logical. So a possible world just means a world that is logical. Like for an
I
example,
didn't ask you what a possible world meant.
to exist in this world just means to be logically possible. Exist in one possible world. That's what that means.
By exist, you mean to be in a possible world?
Yeah. To
just to
be
be
assigned
possible.
in this. Yeah, to be assigned
Well,
in this world.
I don't think the assigned stuff makes any sense. If you're just saying to exist is to be possible under a logical modality,
Wait, I
then
never
that's
said
not
that.
saying anything interesting. Then I don't understand what you're saying.
Yeah, as I said before, exist just means to be.
What's up,
So the
Fruit?
predicate would be whatever the context in which we were talking about is, right? So God is being in this world, in this possible world. So he exists in this possible world, right? He is this possible world.
I don't know
And
what exist means.
I just said to be.
I don't know what that means.
I've already
I don't know what
explained
to
what that
be
means.
means.
I've explained that a plurality of times. To be would be
I don't know what it means.
the predicate of you in concept in whatever the context is. So you would be the
The
predicate.
predicate of you in concept in whatever context. I have no clue what any of that means.
Okay, so it's like you would be the predicate in which the context we are referencing. Like right now, I exist in my room. Existence would be to be. What to be is the predicate of me in my room, right? So God is the predicate in the
None of that
possible
makes
world.
sense to me.
Well, I'm trying to explain it to you, man. I mean, it's just appealing to ignorance. Just because it doesn't make sense to you doesn't mean it's not right.
Appealing to ignorance? I never even made an appeal to ignorance.
I said it's leading to like being an appeal to ignorance, right?
No, it's not.
Well, if you just say you don't understand, you don't understand, you don't know what that means, right? That's not actually attacking my argument. And when I explain to you
And
what it means,
that's obviously not an appeal to ignorance.
yeah, when I explain to you what it means, though, you still don't have any way to attack the argument. So I've just explained what it means again, and you don't know.
Attack the argument? I don't even know the language in the argument. I'm still trying to navigate
Well,
what the hell the argument's saying.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
basically,
you're
so
trying, and I
basically,
keep telling you I don't understand what's being said.
yeah. So a logically possible world.
And then you charge that it's likely because I'm trying to do an argument from ignorance or
No,
something weird like that.
No, I said it's
Which
going to
makes
lead
no
to that.
sense.
So if there's a
I don't
world,
even know how in the world
so a
it's gonna lead to
possible
that.
world is going to be something that's
That
logical.
doesn't even make any sense. If it continues on the same road of not understanding what you're saying, then how can I make a judgment of whether your thing's likely true or false?
Yeah,
if
because
I don't even
eventually you're just
if I
going
don't
to go full ignorance.
if
and
I
you
don't even
understand
understand. Wait, that's not what an appeal to ignorance is.
Yes, it is. You're going to claim that
No.
my argument isn't going to be sound or strong just because you don't understand it. That's just because you're you're running.
Yeah, I don't know where you got that would happen. That I would say the argument's unsound, and yet I don't. That just sounds incoherent. I understand an argument to be a string of propositions. If I don't understand what the propositions are saying, then I can't say an argument's unsound if I don't even know what's being said.
Well, you can say that, right?
So
you
why?
can verbally convey that, right?
But
It just
why
wouldn't be
in the
proper.
literal fuck would you expect me to say that? Why?
Well, people do it all the time, right? It would be via dishonesty.
And do
It could be
you expect me
clearly
to
being
be?
ignorant?
Am I relevantly similar to those people?
How would I even know? I don't have no idea.
Well, presumably you're saying people were like this in the past, but
Yeah, I'm assuming off the
presumably,
priors. It happens all the time. It's intellectually
yeah,
dishonest.
but
People debating on TikTok.
were the priors? Well, I'm not being intellectually dishonest.
I
in
said
any
there
way.
is intellectually
But
dishonest. There's a
yeah,
plurality
but
of
I'm
people.
asking you if in your priors was there anything relevantly similar from me to them, other than the fact that we're
Lack of
debating on the
understanding.
same.
Lack of understanding, yes, and it eventually leads to going full on argument of ignorance. Right?
There's not anything more than that. That maybe they don't understand basic philosophy. If they're saying what you're saying doesn't make any sense, and then they're saying the thing that doesn't make sense is somehow unsound, yet they don't even appreciate what's being said. That sounds like something a layman would say, not me.
Not even that.
So if you have
intellectually
maybe I can say I have priors about laymen saying that, but it's very clear to hear that I have at least a very well fleshed out apprehension of analytic philosophy. So you wouldn't expect me to be doing the same blunders as a layman.
Well,
why in the world would you think someone
I
like
actually
me?
could expect you to do the same thing, right? There's not only laymen.
Wait, you have
there's
priors?
There's sophistry, right? There's people who genuinely know what they're talking about, but they're intellectually dishonest.
If I'm asking you if you have priors about that.
About
You
what?
have priors about that?
Yeah, they're
About
called
people.
yeah, not even laymen. There's like sophists, right? People who know what they're talking about, like they understand the linguistic wording, but they just
Okay,
they're
whatever. We can,
genuinely
yeah, fine.
intellectually
If you have
dishonest.
priors about that, yeah, if you have, well, I think you're being dishonest about that in any case. At least that's
Okay.
my suspicion.
Well,
But
they're called. Have you ever heard of a sophist?
if you have, of course I have. But all I'm asking is if you have priors about people who are not morons and do know philosophy, doing blunders like that. I can't even imagine.
It's just called ratting. It's all over the place in debating, right? It's not about your intellect. It's about your
Ratting? That
rhetoric.
sounds like something an anime debater would say.
No, it's about your argumentation and rhetoric, right? In debating, if you're debating, you could be debating politics, theology,
I would
religion.
understand anyone who is even semi-nourished in philosophy to never say something like, the thing I don't understand you're even conveying is false.
Yeah, I don't know why we're still on this, man. Can we talk about the syllogism? We're kind of going too far now.
Yeah, I still don't know what you mean by existence. To be none of that I
Yeah,
understand.
yeah. Well, I'll just drop the wording existence as I've explained it multiple times and it's just not processing, right? So God is logical, and a possible world is going to be defined as a world that's logical, right? Possibility, at least in science, truths are defined as probabilistic truth, right? If it's probable, it's a truth scientifically. So let's just say we have a world in which the sun is 10% brighter. We're going to call that world a possible world just because there's something illogical about it. We could say that world's possible, right? To occur in actuality. But it doesn't actually have existence. It would just be conceptual, you know? We're just conceptualizing this world. So if this God is logical from premise one, from the maximally great God and the attributes I've applied to him is logical, then he exists in at least one possible world. Meaning he's
I don't know what exist there means.
Well, he would be in at least one possible world.
You're just saying he's logically possible.
Yeah. Meaning he would be in a possible world.
But that would have to form, look, when you say he is possible, that's just not a proposition.
Yeah, I never said it was a proposition. So I'm concluding it from premise
But
one.
modal operators like to say that X is logically possible just requires a proposition there. If the
Yeah, so
proposition is it's logically possible God exists, that's a proposition. Then I
yeah,
just don't know what exists there means.
yeah, I got you. So premise one, it's not gonna be phrasing that I'm using, right? I'm genuinely concluding something from a premise. So premise one was there is no logical contradictions when the existence of the maximally great being that I've assigned these two attributes to. If
Yeah,
that
but I
premise
don't
is true,
understand. I still don't understand what existence there means.
no, there's no logical contradictions in the existence. Do you know what existence means?
No, I don't know what you mean by
Well,
existence. I've
it
said
would
this
be
like
the
a million
being.
times.
Yeah, it would be assigned to the being.
I
So there's no logical
assigned
contradictions
to
for
the being. What does
yeah,
that
existence
mean?
is assigned to the being. So we're talking about the being when we say existence. So there's no
What is
yeah,
the being?
there's no logical contradictions in the maximally great being that I've assigned.
There's no but by being you just mean the entity God. There's
Yeah,
no
the entity
contradiction.
that possesses
But
the two attributes that
wait,
apply to it: omniscience,
but
all-knowing,
God,
omnipotence, all-powerful.
but you want to say there's no contradiction in God existing. That's a
Yeah,
proposition.
that's not what I want to say, right? It's just like
Then what do you want to say?
the wording is there, but you don't understand what the word's saying, right? So I'm just going to drop the word, right? It's just God. There's no illogical contradictions in a maximally great being who has
Then
two attributes of all-knowing and
oh,
all-powerful.
then that's confusion to say it's logically possible.
Yeah, so there's no logical contradictions with it, though, right?
It's not a proposition. So
I
it
never
can't have
said a
contradiction.
proposition. I never said it.
That mean then it's not logically possible.
Wait, okay, so what would be your argument for, or what is illogical about this idea?
Oh no, it's neither logical nor illogical. It's not a proposition.
Okay, that's going to go against logic, right? Non-proposition.
That's going to go against logic.
Yeah, it would be go against the law of excluded in the middle. But
No, that wouldn't.
yes, it would. You can't be logical and illogical.
What do you think the law of excluded middle is saying?
Yeah, you can't be assigned all of your. For example, we can use a representation of a property, right? You can't be all of one property and all of another property. The two things can't
What?
actually be at the same time. Yeah, like think of any
You have
two
no
properties.
clue what you're saying.
Can you think of any two properties right now?
You have no clue what you're saying.
Can you think of any two
Like
properties?
this is just clear gibberish. I don't.
You don't know
This
what
isn't gonna go
property?
far,
I'm
but
so
I can continue to speak with you. But this
What-
is like really bad. This is just gibberish the whole way through.
Yeah, so like I'll give it an example.
Okay, so I have no clue what you mean by existence. You're saying that modal operators can be applied to non-propositions. You're also the reason I don't understand what you mean by existence is because you're using it in a pluralist way in which those things trivially are not ontic under my semantics or can't be ontic. So I have no clue what you mean by existence. You're saying gibberish like non-propositions can satisfy modal operaters.
I
Then
never
you're
said
saying
that.
excluded middle. Then you're saying excluded middle you have this complete gibberish construal of the law of excluded middle. I mean, I don't know where to go. You're just saying gibberish.
Yeah, well, something.
This is like what that brain rot
logical
Aristotelian metaphysics did.
Well, you just said something has no logical contradictions, and something does have logical contradictions, and you didn't say you didn't know.
I never made that claim.
So what was your claim then? You didn't say you were agnostic to it. I said it does.
I claimed it's not I claimed it's not a proposition. So it can't be logical or illogical.
What do you? There's things that aren't propositions that could be logical or illogical. Concepts can't be logical or illogical.
No.
Do you mean
no?
Do you mean put into the format of a proposition?
No. Logicality, to say something is logical, can mean one of two things. It can either, well, actually, maybe it could mean three. There's some epistemic sense you can say something's logical, which just means it's reasonable, but we're not working with that interpretation. There's two other interpretations.
I can define my interpretation. It means no logical contradictions. No logical contradictions.
That means
no logical
you're overtalking me.
contradictions.
Dipshit, you're overtalking me.
I'm defining it for you.
There's
So
two.
you don't understand. No logical contradictions.
You're overtalking me. Yep. There's two interpretations. It's either a well-formed formula or the inference is formally valid, right? In the context of a proposition, a proposition can be regimented into symbolic logic in which it can be expressed as a formula. And if the formula meets all the metalinguistic principles, right, it can model the schema of the metalinguistic principles.
I disagree.
Then shut your mouth. Then it's what's called a well-formed formula, right? That's one interpretation of logical. The other is that it's a well-formed, or that the structure of an inference is valid. Those are the two relevant interpretations here. Both require a proposition. The first just requires just minimally a proposition. The second requires a string of propositions. Now, you're talking about something that has nothing to do with the proposition. Okay, so it's neither the two interpretations.
Yeah.
So it can't be logical or illogical.
Well, that would be under the
because I understand illogical to be a formula that's not well formed, or an inference that's not valid.
Well, that's just not going to be correct in any way, shape, or form. I'm viewing logic as a format. When I said something is logical, it's going to be. Shut your mouth.
When you say
shut
this
your
is
mouth,
wrong,
I'll let you speak.
If you're to say that this isn't the way it's expressed,
shut
in
your
logic,
mouth. I'm trying to educate you. You don't understand what you're talking about.
If you're to say that this is not how it's used in logic,
something that's logical, it just means it has no logical contradictions. That's it. Especially in this.
Yeah, but you understand for something to be logical, it has to be a proposition, right?
I disagree with you on that, right? Are you appealing to like?
Then I'm dropping you. This guy is the greatest buffoon I've talked with in ages. The gibberish was immaculate, right? The gibberish was crazy, but saying that things that are not propositional can be logical is just